Well, hello and welcome to our latest episode of Security Noise. It's January. We're back. I'm Jeff Walton, our application security practice lead at TrustedSec. I am also joined by nyxgeek, who is going to talk to us a little bit about his upcoming Shmoocon talk. And of course, I have our producer, Skyler Tutor, who's here to make sure the show sounds great, as always. As far as recent events in InfoSec to keep an eye on, it looks like the Salt Typhoon blast radius has expanded a little bit. There's at least a ninth telecom that they're now investigating as to if the Chinese might have been into that. As far as the Chinese go, it looks like the FCC's rip and replace rules are possibly expanding to some more organizations, so we may see a shake-up, especially in some of those consumer routers and things like that are on everyone's desks. And of course, with it being 2025, Windows 10 will be going out of support in October of this year. So if you are on that platform and not making a plan to either upgrade or purchase those extended security updates, you probably want to start looking into that. So I'll turn it over to nyxgeek here to tell us a little bit about his Shmoocon talk, and then maybe we'll get into some other cloud authentication and identity management stuff. That's always a favorite subject with him.
Hey everybody. So I'll be doing a talk here at Shmoocon coming up called Azure Survey 2025, 60 million users and counting. It's basically, over the last 3 years, I've performed user enumeration using OneDrive, which is essentially web scraping. And initially I had targeted just corporate users, Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 1000. But after my DEF CON talk, I decided to go on and expand that out to everybody. So I just took the full ICANN.com lists and the net and org and various gov lists that I found on GitHub or that were publicly accessible. And I just sent survey scripts against those all with common username formats. So for instance, J. Smith or John Smith, etc., just based off of census data, statistically likely top names. And so I sprayed those across, finding which tenants and domains were active, which had users in them, and then from there proceeded to dig deeper. I also sprayed popular service account names, which you might be interested to see which ones come up at the top there. Some unexpected ones showed up pretty commonly. So yeah,
Can you give us a little preview? I don't want to steal your thunder, but this will probably come out after your Shmoocon talk anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it will. So the top username is not actually administrator, and it's not even actually admin. The top username is actually info. It outpaces admin by just a little bit. But that was something that I would not have ever expected, is that info would be actually the most popular username out there. And I should give you a caveat here. So these are OneDrive usernames, which means that they have to have been logged in at least once. However, I do think that that stands up pretty well, because I took a look at the SOC radar dump as well, and I did an analysis of that, and info is actually the top one there as well. So yeah, the default account that you might want to look for might be info instead of admin, and might have a weaker password too.
Do you think there's a reason for that in terms of O365 licenses and stuff for like a shared mailbox or anything? Wonder what the driver is.
I actually have no idea what would cause info. I mean, no reply is actually pretty far up there too. There's some ones that you wouldn't think, and no reply is an interesting one, right? Because why is somebody logging into the no reply? Why is there even an account for no reply? Shouldn't that just be an email alias?
Right.
Or something like that?
Yeah.
It's an odd one. Yeah, and then a number of service accounts that show up in there as well, because again, these are ones that had to have been logged into before to make that OneDrive URL be enumerable this way. So it's interesting to see a large number of service accounts show up in there as well, which you may not have expected. So now, besides doing the user enumeration there, I really wanted to make it more of a fully encompassing scan, right? That's why I used the survey lists across all of the domains, just to I didn't want to just focus on Fortune 500. I will pull those out and talk about them separately, but just to compare and contrast. But yeah, I wanted to really try to get a big picture of like what's the most popular overall, and see, even with small accounts, like what are the most popular account names. Yeah, it was pretty interesting to see some fun number stuff in there with numeric usernames, which are odd. They bunch up and you wouldn't think that, but there are groups of areas that are more statistically likely to have users in them as far as like 6 digits to go. Maybe like 105 in that range, 105,000, or like 110,000. Like different sub ranges of those are more likely to have users, and it's It's all just real interesting data to look through. There's going to be a lot of stuff going through in a short amount of time there. It's a 10-minute talk, so it's hopefully keep you interested and keep slamming through stats and data and fun things that I found. So besides the usernames, I also took a look at Teams presence data. Right now, Teams presence, external access as it's called, is enabled by default on all tenants. So that means if you don't know any better, anybody in the world can message you when you're on Teams. And so a lot of places will stand this up. They might use, Teams as a temporary thing. And so when they stand it up, they don't realize that this is enabled and they leave it on. So there's actually a number of popular figures that we'll be doing it around the world, looking at popular people who don't maybe know that their external access is enabled and that you can see when they're online. That type of stuff. We'll also be looking at a fun project around Microsoft monitoring. It's actually going to be an application I'll be releasing in February where you too can monitor your company or another company. Basically, it's just a front end for a database where you will scrape people's presence on your own. This is all self-hosted. I'm going to release it as, but you'll scrape presence into a database, and then you'll have a front end dashboard you can look through to see what your people are doing, or what anybody's people are doing if they have external access enabled. And of course, this is limited to like away, available, busy, but there's a lot you can tell about people based on their schedules and what days they take off or what hours they're up, that type of stuff. So I'm really just trying to draw attention to this problem that Microsoft should not be enabling this by default. This should not be doable, and that there's a lot of information that people are maybe leaking. So in the talk, I actually mentioned we'll also be looking at what Satya's work schedule is like, or at least when he's available online most often. Just as a demo to see, to share what's possible. I mean, because this is a feature, right? This is not a hack at all. This is meant to work like this. And so people are publishing this information about themselves. And most users, I feel, are probably not aware of this.
What would be a business reason for having it enabled by default?
So, I mean, if you are working a lot with external companies, and you didn't want, and they changed a lot, that's really the only time I could see using the default setting, is if you were outward facing and you were talking to many different companies all the time and you don't know who they're going to be. But I feel like that case has to be really small because you can make allow lists. You can put specific lists of allowed domains in there. So if you have partners that you want to work with, you can definitely open it up right to them and not open it up to the world. But instead they leave it on. And so one of the things that I'm going to reveal here also is that this setting is disproportionately enabled in smaller companies. Big companies, Fortune 500 companies, almost all have it disabled because they can hire pen testers to come in and tell them you should turn this off. And as you go into the Fortune 1000, as you get further down the list, you get higher percentage of it not being enabled. And then when you get to net and org and edu, especially edu, they all have it enabled because they don't know any better or they don't have the resources to do it. And I mean, it makes sense. You're not going to go in and start changing settings in your cloud provider if you don't explicitly know that you should. I mean, you don't know what you're going to break if you don't know any better. If you're just, in a lot of places use Microsoft products because they're great for small business, right? You can have infrastructure of your own, but you might not know exactly what you can turn on and off. And so it's really, I feel like it's their duty that they should make it secure by default because, and I'm not first to say this by any means. There's been many people who have said this, but it really should be disabled by default. Security should be the default. It's ridiculous that they expect people to have to know this, to have to understand that it would be shipped in an insecure state. It just is silly, and we shouldn't have to be discussing it really. Like, this should not have ever, it's just disappointing, I guess. But yeah, they really put the burden on the users, and it's something that'd be so easy for them to disable from the get-go instead of leaving it on and leaving it to be an issue for people down the line. So.
Well, I'm sure the argument for leaving it on is to get people to experience the feature, right? And decide that they like it and want to use it.
So, but I mean, with that even, so you're going to message somebody, a friend of yours at another company and chat with them for a while? I don't understand what they're trying to entice with this unless, and if you need it, you can enable it. I guess I don't understand what the real business use is for why it would be the default.
Well, I think that's exactly the case is you're going to chat with somebody or your contacts at your partner, especially your sales and your marketing people and stuff that want to network, those kinds of things. I know, certainly in the past, I remember being at, a reseller way back in the early 2000s when presence was going to be the next big thing, right? and IT departments just didn't want to turn that stuff on. I mean, every network administrator's instinct when it came to like, hey, let's federate link and stuff was no. So I mean, I can kind of understand why Microsoft tries to go in this direction. I don't like it either, but I at least understand where that comes from.
Sure, that's a good point. And I mean, from a product manager's perspective, I guess that's been a huge thing, is like product managers at Microsoft pushing for these insecure defaults because it'll give their product a little bit of the edge to keep, being used.
So another thing I was curious about, you mentioned, going after OneDrive specifically this time. If memory serves, some of your previous user enumeration efforts were really targeting the Teams API and stuff. Am I not remembering correctly there, or was there a technical reason for shifting to looking at OneDrive?
No, I think you're just conflating. So during my initial work, I did use Teams to do a lot of pulling of their object IDs and then do monitoring that way. But the main enumeration was always with OneDrive, just because it's so simple. It's a head request, so it's super lightweight. And I mean, that's I got to finish tallying up how many requests I've made at this point, but it is significant.
Big log files, I bet.
Well, so the nice thing about my logging is that I keep logs of every word list that was attempted, the start time, end time, so I can get average run times and everything of every single word list, and I can also then count up, right? Because I can get a count of each word list, and then do a quick script to bash, grab the word count of that file, multiply it by how many times it's been run, and get a full count. It's pretty neat to have all this data, and also like being able to source where you were able to pull these from. These are all census word lists, right? So it's nice to be able to go back though and say, okay, I have legit ties showing what word list was successful in finding what accounts. So, but yeah, it's great data. I wish I had more time to finish going through this all. Your data always keeps growing, and you have to rerun your data sets as time goes on, and so it could be a project that never ends. So at this point, I'm calling it quits after 3 years. My 3 years will be up in February, and so I'm going to be shutting this all down. I figure if nobody's listening, I mean, I've definitely seen some places fix their teams, especially like places that were mentioned in the talk. They seem to fix, or their guest access, I should say. They fixed their guest access. That was one thing that came about from the DEF CON talk. But I'm not sure that Microsoft is going to do anything about the rest of it. I've seen some remediation, hopefully as a result of that, but I don't think that there's been any big push from Microsoft to fix user enumeration. I feel like at this point, I've kind of shown what can be done. I hope people understand this and they make good decisions with their administrative choices going down the line, making hard usernames, using email aliases instead of using your UPN as your email. Kind of making it harder for attackers, because Microsoft isn't going to make it harder for attackers. They want things to be easy and usable. And so, yeah. But at any rate, so I'll be closing this all down. It's going to be nice to kind of be going out with my research at the same time my Shmoocon is ending. With its 20th anniversary there. But yeah, it'll be nice to be able to step away a little bit. This project has been kind of like tending a fire for 3 years. You have to kind of keep your bots going, keep them fed and running with work to do. And then, of course, the expenses of it too. So, I mean, it'll be nice to end the user enumeration. I'm going to be releasing some top word lists in different formats as a result of this research here, at least. And then I'll also be releasing the survey word lists so people can try to recreate this or improve these if they wanted to. The survey lists, because my survey lists weren't perfect. I'm not a mathematician. I'm just trying to estimate my best with different username formats and how many of them should suffice for a survey. J Smith, for instance, has way fewer permutations than John Smith, just because the number of characters, right? You're reducing information when you go from John Smith to J Smith, and so at any rate, it'll be nice to put an end to this. So hopefully,
I'm sure there's some folks at MS Cert that are actually a little bit relieved to hear you say this too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Microsoft's not throwing a party. Are you going to be throwing a party or some sort of closing ceremony?
I think a nice quiet bourbon after shutting down the last VPS will be how I celebrate.
Seems appropriate.
Can I go on a really weird tangent?
Of course.
Maybe not too weird. I don't know. But, you do a lot of cloud pen test work and stuff as well, I know. So user enumeration and presence, of course, we've discussed on this show in the past the physical and social threats to it. But as far as actual account threats, in 2025, with things like conditional access, privileged access management, other zero trust policies, does account enumeration compromise primary infrastructure very often?
So it's a foundational thing, I think, is the main thing. So, I mean, are we talking about presence in particular or user enumeration?
Well, like, for instance, I guess the presence in particular, the data that you're specifically pulling out of Teams and out of OneDrive here, are you usually able to use that to gain access to organization resources?
So the OneDrive enumeration, yes. The presence information, though, I think that's more of... All right, so you can tell if they're mobile or if they're at their desktop, right? That's one of the things that you can pull from that. With the same presence API, you can also pull their out-of-office messages. So if they're out of office and you have, contact this person. I know on red teams that they do, in fact, use the out-of-office messages that you can retrieve, which is part of the presence API. And so it definitely gets used to help with social engineering, furthering attacks in that way. You're able to monitor people's work time, but also their off time. So, I mean, even if you're trying to stay anonymous or to, just do your own thing, the fact that somebody can tell when you're online and off, when you're taking holidays, they can infer, what religion you are. They can infer, are you a night owl or are you a morning person? Where do you live most likely? There's data that's leaked here and that you might not want to be leaked. I mean, what hours you keep, that's obviously most of the time going to show, or at least when you're available for work, that's going to show where you work at and what time zone you're in, that type of stuff. Often your full names are in here. So with the presence data, if you can go from a username to a full name easily, because when you pull that presence data from the username, you then retrieve their full name, their display name, as it's written in AD or in Azure. So you get their full name then. So even like going from, if you have numeric usernames, like, oh, I'm all set, I'm great, I have numeric usernames, you can't tell anything about me. That's not true, because if you have Teams enabled, I can just pull it up in there and it'll convert it for me, and I can pull it out of the API there. So yeah, there's just a lot more information that gets leaked than needs to, and especially being at your desk or not, which is obviously just saying if you're on a desktop client versus a mobile client. But still, I mean, knowing that somebody's at their computer, I have seen actually one of these people with external access, one of these famous people is actually, I might as well, it's turned off now. It was Michael Lindell used to have his external access opened. And in the last few months, it became disabled, and I'm pretty sure, somebody figured out that, yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of people like this, and it's of all parties and everything, but just trying to find sensational names, people that people are going to recognize, and looking for them has been a fun thing, and that'll be in this talk here, just around the world looking at that type of stuff.
Well, I was just wondering, I guess, specifically, you look at things like conditional access, hours. I mean, are people using this data to say, hey, this guy's a remote employee, he probably lives in South Korea, but he's working for this company in Cambridge, so they're used to seeing him logging in at all hours of the night. I'm going to target this account specifically, and I'm going to go after it while most of their IT people are asleep.
That's a great point, and because that's actually another attribute that can be pulled sometimes. It's not always there, but you can sometimes get the city and the country that they're in. So, I mean, that's another thing there. And then, of course, I didn't mention this, but there's the fact that if this is enabled, that means anybody can message. And while it does display a banner that they're from an external entity, if you're using an external help desk, you may be able to come up with a plausible, scenario where you'd be contacting a user to assist with some issue. But at any rate, it then falls on the user. It's not a technical control that's there. It's falling then to social engineering the user, because it's possible. I mean, just think about en masse AI attacks with this. Like, you make a giant chatbot that can, fool most people and just play a numbers game. I mean, you don't have to get everyone. You just need to get one. And you can automate this type of thing so easily now. So here's a quick possible spoiler of an idea. So you could make like a Teams roulette app that just grab two random users and put them together into a chat. And just see who accepts it and who joins and what happens. And you could have the bot say something like, oh, I thought you two would, or I thought you'd really enjoy talking to so-and-so. I was telling them all about you. And then just leave it at that and see what happens. It could be a fun social experiment across millions of corporate users. So, I mean, yeah, there's this type of thing that you could do, though. It's just fun antics.
I want to read this paper. You need to do this. You need to do this.
I have the user lists. It'd be trivial. I was actually thinking about playing with that today and just setting up a test demo of it. But it could be a fun experiment. You know, share some of the select chat transcripts of two strangers that have been introduced to each other, and see what happens.
So what's next after you put this project down?
Oh, I can't talk about that. No. I have a lot of other projects to finish up. You know, I have blogs that I've been sitting on for like a year and a half or more that I just like, I mean, I need to knock this out and get this out. But you only have so much time in a day and only so much time for projects. So you got to pick and choose what you want to do with that time you get. And yeah, I'm going to put this one to rest. I think I've done all I can with this so far. So, I mean, hopefully they'll make some changes. But yeah, next I think I'm going to move to something more physical in nature, something Raspberry Pi and robotics and drones and that area I think is a fun area to move into at this point.
Planning to fly them over New Jersey, are you?
Yes. No. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of fun stuff to be had in that realm right now. I mean, especially with how cheap and plentiful parts are, it's going to take off a lot, I think, as far as popularity and just what you can do with them. I mean, even things like actually agricultural uses of drones. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff, a lot of fun things to look at.
Now, don't you also have a talk coming up in Norway?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So actually, that's I have a talk coming up in Norway. It'll be at HackCon. That's also in the 20th one, which is crazy. Two 20th con anniversary talks. But so this one will be slightly different. It's the last year I was there, I spoke about doing OneDrive enumeration, but focused on Norwegians, and got to about 1 million out of, I think Norway is around 5.5 million, if I recall correctly. Hopefully I'm right with that. But yeah, I got almost 1 million. It's heavily used in Norway. All the Microsoft stuff is. But so I did that last year. This year we're going to be changing things slightly. We're going to be taking a look at presence data and doing some stuff with that. With the holidays, it's been a great time for mining out of office replies. So I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, there's a lot to be gone through, a lot of data to look through, and doing word popularities, and hopefully I can find, there's this neat thing, you can gauge like the positive or negativeness of a conversation with some framework. And my plan is to take all these different companies and take all of their out-of-office messages and get the general, like, are they a positive, neutral, or negative outlook, based on the words that are used. It'll just, fun stuff like that. Taking a look at word analysis, what are popular holidays, and what popular... Holidays is actually a really neat one that I looked at. Taking a look at what holidays people have in their out-of-office messages, right? And so, like, for instance, 4th of July and stuff like that, but then things that I didn't think of, like the Indian Independence Day, which I believe is August 15th, showed up as well there, so just because it's real neat to see what people are taking out of office for, and so that'll also be shown at the Shmoocon talk, but looking at fun words that show up and word popularity of different words in people's out of office.
How this would correlate with stock market performance.
Oh, yeah. With how many people are out of office, you could.
Well, how many people are out of office, but the positivity thing too, right? If everybody's like in a cheerful mood,
yeah, yeah, right, yeah. So that's the thing. You can tell a lot. You can do so much business analysis with this. Like, you can tell if people are getting fired, if they're hiring, if how many hours are being taken off, just all that kind of stuff.
Is this going to be like the new corporate Myers-Briggs assessment type of deal? Personality quiz?
Yeah, right. Let me see your out-of-office messages and how often you're online. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. Definitely the holidays, it was a fun thing to look through there with presence data.
Well, why we've got him here, I think we should, and I know, and I want to tease a topic for a future show, because we are going to be discussing modern authentication in 2025, but with this particular guest on the show, I think we've got to ask him, at least, especially in the Azure space, what are your authentication identity-related predictions for the year?
Okay. I think conditional access, that's going to be a big thing that people are going to be looking at more. I think that they're going to see it's a little less reliable than people think. Besides that, I mean, password spreading's been getting harder, that's for sure. I think that'll continue. I predict there will be one giant Microsoft issue in some 10-year-old plus product as well. That's my
Gasp.
Yeah, I know, right? That could never happen.
Well, aren't they talking about a new Exchange release this year? That's always usually an exciting event when it comes to deployments, because people, for some reason, like to get on the upgrade bandwagon on that one, and there's a lot to go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Skyler, any final thoughts?
No, I'm still wrapping my head around being able to effectively profile people based off their out-of-office messages. That's just crazy. Like, it's something I hadn't thought about. I've done some, forensic work. I've done some profile stuff with my forensic work, and I don't think we've ever looked at out-of-office messages in a way to analyze a person's personality or profile or anything like that.
So right now, how I'm logging them is, at first I was just logging them like one per user, but now I just make an MD5 of it, and then I log it per unique MD5 with the username also. But like, just so that way, if they update or change it, I don't overwrite the last one or anything. It's just, each one gets assigned a unique identifier, and that's my primary key that I use is the MD5. So collision maybe, but hopefully not. Like.
Probably not.
Very cool.
I know, right?
Out of office messages, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I gotta figure out some weird way to obfuscate my out of office messages that don't weird out my clients.
Yeah, right.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I do want to thank NYXgeek for joining us today, and I want to thank you all for listening. Security Noise is a production of TrustedSec LLC. If you or organization have questions or need security information, go to www.trustedsec.com. We'll see you next time.
See y'all.